Imagine spending, uh, spending 9 agonizing years trying to solve the mystery of your own sudden staggering wealth.
Yeah, it sounds crazy, right?
Right. Like you are a high school dropout who
Mhm.
went from washing office floors for $30 a month to building this massive $1 million global syndicate.
Which is just a wild leap.
Exactly. And to the outside world, you're the ultimate success story. But internally, it is literally tearing you apart
Mhm.
because you have absolutely no idea how you did it.
Yeah. It's like this terrifying type of imposter syndrome. I mean, if you don't know the access code to the vault you're standing inside of, you basically live in this constant low-level terror that the heavy steel door is just going to lock behind you.
You'll never be able to get back in.
Exactly. You're trapped by your own success in a way.
Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to this deep dive. Our mission today is to explore a really fascinating stack of source material detailing the completely nonlinear personal trajectory of a man named Bob Proctor.
And it really is nonlinear. Oh, absolutely. We are tracking a journey that basically defies conventional business logic. But we aren't just here to read a biography or, just marvel at a financial leap.
Right, because, our audience already knows the broad strokes of the self-development
Yeah,
work.
you guys already know that stuff.
Yeah.
So today we are hunting for the actual underlying mechanics, like the deep psychological and neurological machinery of how a life is fundamentally rewired.
And to really understand the mechanics of that rewiring, you
Yeah.
kind of have to look at the original wiring first. You know the baseline.
Let's get into that baseline. Where are we starting?
So we are looking at a young man in the early 1960s with only a couple of months of high school education, like no safety net, no rich uncle, no formal business acumen at all.
Wow.
Yeah, and by his own admission, his life was incredibly dull. He was just on the wrong road, making him a mere $4,000 a year, and he was deeply, profoundly unhappy. Which is, it's a psychological weight that I think we need to pause and just acknowledge. I want you, the listener, to really picture that. Because, we've all had moments of feeling stuck, but this is a really specific type of despair.
Yeah, it's heavy.
It really is. It's the absolute conviction that you are mathematically doomed, that success or wealth or even just basic autonomy is this gated community reserved for people who are born with better brains or better zip codes.
Right. It is a state of just completely learned helplessness. In his mind, his lack of formal education wasn't just a circumstance, it was his permanent
Yeah,
identity.
is who he was.
Exactly. And when you internalize that level of class mobility, especially in the mid-20th century, you don't even look for a way out because your brain has already decided that all the exits are basically bricked over.
Right. So the central mystery of this deep dive kind of begins right here. Like, how does a mind trapped in that specific prison suddenly orchestrate an international corporate empire without going back to school, without acquiring some fancy degree, and without inheriting a single dime?
Well, the turning point happened over 50 years ago. And it didn't start with a venture capital injection or anything like that. It started with an ultimatum.
An ultimatum.
Yeah, a friend of his who essentially stepped into the role of a completely uncompromising mentor handed him a copy of Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich.
Okay, and obviously, our audience is highly familiar with that text.
Right, of course. But the book itself is completely secondary to the psychological intervention that actually accompanied it.
Right, because, just handing someone a famous book is not a magical intervention. Like, millions of people have read it and are still broke.
Exactly. The catalyst was the mentor's strict, almost aggressive directive. He told Proctor, and this is the crucial part. He said, follow my instructions exactly until you find out that I am lying to you or that I don't know what I'm talking about.
Wow, that's intense.
Yeah, and he added, I don't lie, and I do know what I'm talking about. You're going to end up a big winner.
That is just such a profound bypass of Proctor's internal security system. The mentor is essentially saying, your current operating system is corrupted. It generated a $4,000 a year life of misery. So stop trying to compute solutions with a broken processor and run my software instead.
That is precisely what happened. The mentor saw a reservoir of capability that Proctor was just utterly blind to.
Yeah, he couldn't see it at all.
Right. By issuing an ultimatum rather than just giving casual advice, the mentor allowed Proctor to temporarily borrow someone else's belief system. He didn't have to believe in himself. He just had to believe that his mentor wasn't a liar.
And so he runs the software, he follows the instructions. But the external manifestation of this grand paradigm shift is so incredibly humble. Like, he didn't rush out and try to raise seed capital for a tech firm.
No, not at all.
He started by washing floors. Specifically, according to the source material, one office floor twice a month for $30.
It is the ultimate microaction. But what we need to really analyze is the velocity of the growth that immediately followed, because the math is about to break here.
Okay, let's hear the math.
Within a single year of applying this borrowed software, his income exploded from $4,000 a year to $175,000 a year.
Okay, I am going to push back hard right here because we cannot just gloss over those numbers.
I know it sounds absurd.
It is absurd. $175,000 in the 1960s is astronomical.
Right.
It's the equivalent of well over $1 million today. You cannot physically mop enough floors with your own two hands to generate that kind of revenue in 12 months.
Right.
It is just physically impossible.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people clean floors for a living, and they work incredibly hard, but they don't accidentally build syndicates.
Yeah.
So what is the actual mechanical mechanism of that growth?
Well, you're entirely right to call out the impossibility of the physical labor. The surface variables, like a dropout, a mop, and a book, they do not produce that mathematical output. The mechanism wasn't an increase in physical effort. It was an absolute mutation in his conceptualization of reality.
Okay, what does that look like practically?
Well, to scale a service business to that degree in the 1960s, without the internet, without modern logistics software, it requires massive leverage. It requires hiring teams, establishing trust with large commercial real estate managers, understanding cash flow, and basically taking on extreme risks.
Right, so he had to become a completely different species of operator.
Exactly. His internal paradigm shifted, which immediately altered his risk tolerance and his networking behaviors. Like, he stopped seeing himself as a guy with a mop and started operating as the manager of a massive logistical enterprise.
Wow.
And the trajectory only accelerated from there. Within 5 years, that income crossed the $1 million mark. He scaled from a single office in Toronto to Montreal, Boston, Cleveland, Atlanta, and eventually expanded operations across the Atlantic all the way to London, England.
But this is where the narrative takes a really sharp, unexpected turn. Because earning the millions, like achieving the thing that 99% of the population assumes will just solve all their problems, wasn't the finish line. Earning the money actually triggered a 9-year crisis.
Yeah, it triggered intense cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
Proctor was sitting on top of an international business, but he held a deeply ingrained, almost universal societal belief, which is to earn massive amounts of money, you have to be highly educated.
Right.
You need the MBA, the Ivy League pedigree, the traditional markers of intellect.
And he knew his own resume. He knew he dropped out of high school in a matter of months. And yet here he was, out-earning certified geniuses.
So he becomes consumed by a singular question, why? And what's fascinating here is that his interrogation of his own success led him to uncover a phenomenon we now recognize in psychology as unconscious competence.
Unconscious competence.
Yeah, he began studying the top performers across massive global organizations like insurance companies, brokerages, massive sales floors, and he discovered a really startling pattern.
Which is the 99 out of 100 rule, right?
Yes. He found that if you isolate the absolute top-tier performers in these massive corporations, 99 out of 100 of them are completely incapable of explaining the mechanics of their own success.
Wait, I find that incredibly hard to accept at face value. You're telling me the top salespeople at like IBM or Merrill Lynch in that era had no strategy. They just
Yeah.
kind of bumbled their way into multi-million-dollar quotas.
No, not at all. They had brilliant strategies, but the strategies were no longer conscious.
Okay, explain that.
Think of it neurologically. When you first learn to drive a manual transmission car, the cognitive load is immense. You are consciously thinking about the clutch, the gas, the mirrors. But after 10 years, you can drive across town, shifting gears perfectly, while having a deep philosophical conversation, and you won't even remember the drive.
Yeah, I've totally done that. It's almost scary.
Right. Well, the skill has migrated from the prefrontal cortex, which is the conscious analytical brain, down to the basal ganglia, the habit center. These top performers had internalized the behaviors of success so deeply that it just felt like breathing to them.
Oh, I see.
They assumed it was just who they were, like a personality trait rather than a replicable sequence of mechanics.
And Proctor realized that if those top performers actually possessed the conscious mechanical blueprint of their success, the corporations would have extracted it, bottled it, and force-fed it to every single employee in the building.
Exactly, but they couldn't.
Because the stars were flying entirely on instruments they couldn't even see.
Precisely. And Proctor refused to be one of those blind stars.
Which brings me to the absolute madness of his reaction. Because honestly, most people, myself included, If we suddenly stumbled into $1 million empire against all statistical odds, we would just take the win.
Right, you just go to the beach.
Exactly. We would buy a boat, move to an island, and never ask the universe another question. Why would you spend 9 grueling years studying with brilliant minds all over the world just to interrogate your own good luck?
It seems counterintuitive.
It really does. It's like winning the Powerball and then refusing to spend a dime until you spend a decade studying the aerodynamics and the exact physics of the ping pong balls inside the lottery machine.
I love that analogy. It looks like madness, but it's actually the ultimate pursuit of psychological security. Let's expand your lottery metaphor a bit.
Okay, go for it.
If you win the lottery, you know it was a random statistical anomaly. You can't control it. But if you built $1 million business and you feel like it was a lottery win, like if you don't understand the mechanics of your own actions, you live in a state of quiet terror.
Because you can't replicate it.
Exactly. You are secretly convinced that tomorrow the market will shift or your luck will run out and you won't know how to rebuild it. You don't actually own your success. Your success owns you. Proctor spent 9 years interrogating the ping pong balls because he needed the formula. He wanted replicable mastery, not just a transient result.
And here is the brutal irony of the whole thing. After 9 years, he finally does it. He connects the dots backward. He understands the mechanics of paradigm shifts, of the subconscious mind, of unconscious competence. He holds the blueprint to human potential.
He has the master code.
He does. And then he hits a wall so paralyzing that it almost stopped the whole story in his tracks.
Yeah, he was totally defeated by his own profound shyness.
It is such a striking, tragic paradox. He runs an international syndicate. He is financially bulletproof. But the source notes that he was so deeply insecure, he wouldn't even raise his hand to ask a question in a room of 4 or 5 people.
It's a perfect illustration of how highly compartmentalized human development can be. I mean, you can have the executive function to manage a global payroll, but interpersonal evaluation, the fear of being judged by a handful of peers, can completely override your nervous system.
It's just wild.
He possessed information that could alter the trajectory of human lives, but he was trapped in a prison of self-consciousness.
So what does this mean for the person listening to this right now? Because we've all been there. I want you to think about this. How many times have you been sitting in a boardroom or a creative meeting and you had the absolute right answer?
Oh yeah, we've all done that.
Right. You saw the solution clearly, but your own internal volume knob was turned down so low by your own insecurity that you just sat there silent while someone else pitched a worse idea.
Yeah.
How much sheer genius is currently suffocating in conference rooms across the world simply because the person holding it is terrified to speak up?
It's a staggering loss of human capital, honestly. And it's crucial to understand how Proctor viewed this obstacle. The source material is very careful to note that Proctor didn't view his entire personality as a disease. He explicitly recognized the good side to his shyness.
Right. The ability to tolerate isolation.
Exactly. His introversion, his deep comfort with solitude, was the very asset that allowed him to spend thousands of hours driving alone across North America to build his business.
That makes total sense.
Right. It gave him the obsessive solitary focus required for a 9-year deep dive into psychology. He didn't want to destroy his core nature. He just wanted to surgically remove the specific fear that was preventing his free expression.
He needed a psychological scalpel.
Yeah.
And he found it in the form of 2 very specific mentors. So let's get to the first one, which is Earl Nightingale. For those who aren't steeped in the history of personal development, Nightingale was a foundational titan in the mid-20th century.
He was a legend.
Yeah, absolute legend. Proctor was absolutely obsessed with Nightingale's audio program Lead the Field, specifically a record covering the concept of attitude.
And when we say obsessed, we are talking about a physical, tactile reality. He didn't just casually listen on a commute. He played this specific vinyl record over 1,000 times.
1,000 times. That's just...
He essentially wore the grooves out of the vinyl over his 9-year search.
And the core thesis of that specific record was a really uncomfortable observation about human nature. Nightingale stated that human beings have a bizarre, almost universal tendency to minimize what we can accomplish while simultaneously assuming that other people can achieve things that we inherently cannot.
It's the ultimate externalization of agency. We look at someone who is thriving and we immediately rationalize it by granting them superhuman status. We say, oh, she has a photographic memory, or he is just naturally charismatic.
We make excuses for why they can do it and we can't.
Exactly. We assign them a special gene that we believe we lack. But when we look inward, we only see friction, doubt, and limitation. Nightingale's argument was that this is an illusion. He insisted that every single human being possesses deep reservoirs of talent and ability that remain entirely untapped.
Now, Proctor had listened to this record 1,000 times. Like, if you stopped him on the street, he could probably recite it word for word. He thought he understood it.
He had acquired the data. He had complete intellectual comprehension. But he did not have embodied understanding.
What's the difference there?
Well, the concept was living in his prefrontal cortex, right? But it hadn't yet penetrated his subconscious paradigm.
Which brings us to the actual explosion. Like, the moment the data drops into his nervous system and actually alters his reality. I want to set the scene vividly because the source material paints such a brilliant picture of a 1970s seminar.
Oh yeah, this is a great scene.
It's amazing. Picture a massive ballroom at the O'Hare Hyatt Hotel. There are 1,000 people in the audience, split right down the middle, 500 on the left, 500 on the right, with a wide central aisle. And pacing the front of the room is a man named Bill Gove.
And Bill Gove was widely considered the Frank Sinatra of speakers. He didn't hide behind a podium. He had this mesmerizing, relaxed authority pacing the stage with a handheld microphone, completely commanding a room of 1,000 people.
And Proctor is standing way in the back of the room, essentially hiding in the shadows, paralyzed by the very idea of doing what Gove is doing. And Gove starts talking about the concept of authenticity.
Right.
He delivers this line. He says, if I want to be free, I've got to be me. Not the me I think you think I should be. Not the me I think my wife thinks I should be. Not the me I think my kids think I should be. He is talking about the violent shedding of external expectations.
And as Proctor watches this man physically embody total freedom on a stage, something finally clicks. The 1,000 repetitions of the Earl Nightingale record suddenly ignite. He hears Nightingale's voice echoing in his head. We tend to minimize the things we can do.
Wow.
And standing in the back of that Hyatt ballroom, the illusion just shatters.
He realizes he has been doing exactly what the record warned against. Like, he was looking at Bill Gove and assuming Gove was born with some magical speaking gene that Proctor was just denied. He was minimizing his own deep reservoir of talent to protect his ego from the risk of failure.
Exactly. The intellectual data finally became a visceral truth. He realized his silence wasn't a biological mandate. It was a choice driven by a false paradigm. And in that moment, he didn't just decide to learn public speaking. He decided to track down Bill Gove and demand that Gove mentor him.
Which he does. They end up becoming incredible lifelong friends.
Yeah.
But the actual tactical coaching that Gove provides is what I find so brilliant.
Genius.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because Gove doesn't teach him vocal warm-ups. He doesn't give him a textbook on stage blocking or hand gestures. He attacks the psychology of the fear.
Yes. Gove provided the ultimate paradigm shift for performance anxiety. He told Proctor, if you want to be effective, you have to stop thinking about yourself. Forget how you look. Forget how you sound. Fall in love with the idea of helping the audience. Because you possess extremely valuable information and they need it.
This is massive. If we connect this to the deeper mechanics of human behavior, the cure for his crippling shyness wasn't to build a massive bulletproof ego. It wasn't to puff out his chest and pretend to be an alpha male. The cure for paralyzing fear was radical empathy.
That is the perfect phrase for it. Radical empathy. Let's break down what shyness actually is at a mechanical level.
Okay, yeah, let's do that.
Shyness is a state of intense, suffocating narcissism. I don't mean that maliciously. But mechanically, when you are shy, your internal monologue is 100% self-focused. You're thinking, how do I look? Am I sweating? Are they judging my voice? What if I forget my lines?
It's all me, me, me.
Exactly. It is entirely ego-driven. Gove's advice short-circuited that ego loop. By forcing Proctor to shift the spotlight from how am I being perceived to how can I serve the people sitting in front of me, the ego is removed from the equation. When you are entirely focused on service, there is literally no room left in the brain for self-consciousness.
It is such a beautiful reframe. And the fact that they became such close friends, I mean, the source notes that Gove actually delivered his final speech at nearly 90 years old for Proctor's international business. It's just a phenomenal full-circle testament to that mentorship.
Yeah, it's a great story.
But this brings us to the most critical part of this deep dive. We have tracked the whole journey. We understand the obstacles, the epiphanies, the mentors. But how does the listener actually apply this? Because let's be painfully honest, we have all had these massive aha moments that just evaporate by Tuesday morning.
Oh, absolutely. The source material addresses this phenomenon very directly. It warns against the danger of what we can call the blip.
The blip. It is the bane of the personal development world.
It really is.
You read an incredible book, you go to a high-energy seminar, you listen to a deep dive like this. Your dopamine spikes. Your motivation is through the roof. You start waking up at 5 a.m., You change your behavior for exactly 4 days, and you see a little blip in your results.
Hmm.
But within 2 weeks, the gravitational pull of your old life takes over, and you crash right back to your baseline. The results never stick.
And this is where the combination of Proctor's entire 9-year investigation comes into focus. He realized that conscious motivation is utterly powerless against subconscious programming.
Utterly powerless.
Right. So the antidote to the blip, the ultimate master key to permanent structural change, is repetition.
Repetition. I have to admit, when you first hear that, it feels like a letdown. It sounds so mundane.
It sounds mundane until you understand the neuroscience behind it. Think back to the evidence we've covered. Why did he listen to the Earl Nightingale record 1,000 times? Why did his very first mentor issue an ultimatum to follow the instructions exactly over and over without deviation? The directive from the source material is explicitly clear. You must watch, listen, or practice the new concept over and over and over and over again.
Walk us through the actual mechanics of that. Why does reading a concept once fail to change us?
Because reading something once merely introduces the data to your conscious intellect. It allows you to nod your head and say, ah, yes, radical empathy, I understand. But your conscious intellect does not regulate your nervous system. It does not control your fight or flight response, and it does not dictate your autonomic habits.
Your subconscious paradigm controls all of that.
Exactly. And the subconscious mind does not learn through logic. It learns through trauma, or it learns through relentless repetition. Repetition, which is Hebbian learning, where neurons that fire together wire together, is the only non-traumatic mechanism that drives a concept down from the conscious mind into the subconscious operating system. The source dictates that repetition literally fixes the idea in your mind. Once it is fixed, your baseline reality alters.
I love this. It's the difference between a flash flood and a river.
Okay, yeah, unpack that.
So if you have a massive flash flood, which is the equivalent of reading an inspiring book and getting a huge spike of motivation, a ton of water violently rushes through the landscape. It makes a lot of noise. It might knock over a few trees. But a week later, when the water dries up, the actual bedrock is entirely unchanged. The landscape is exactly the same.
Right.
But a river that flows continuously, quietly, persistently over the exact same rock for 1,000,000 years. That repetition carves the Grand Canyon. It permanently alters the physical bedrock of the Earth. So repetition is literally the tool that rewires our default state.
Exactly. The continuous flow of that psychological river washes away the sediment of your old paradigm. The deeply wired beliefs that told Proctor he wasn't smart enough or that told him to be terrified of a microphone, and simultaneously it carves a permanent new neural pathway for confidence and execution to flow through automatically.
So without the repetition, the old wiring just takes back over.
Without the friction of repetition, the old wiring will always reassert itself. Always. Repetition isn't just a memory tool, it is the fundamental physics of personal transformation.
Okay, let's synthesize the absolute masterclass in human potential we've just unpacked here. We started with a man trapped in a $4,000 a year existence, armed with nothing but a mop and a borrowed belief system. He follows a strict ultimatum to the letter, bypassing his own faulty logic, and scales a floor cleaning hustle into a massive multinational syndicate.
Which is incredible in itself.
Right. But instead of coasting on the cash, he spends 9 grueling years ruthlessly interrogating his own success to decode the gap between conscious intellect and unconscious competence.
And in unlocking that code, he collides with his own deepest shadow, a paralyzing shyness that threatens to silence his life's work. But through the catalytic mentorship of Earl Nightingale's relentless audio and Bill Gove's stage presence, he realizes that his fear is just misplaced ego.
Radical empathy.
Exactly. By shifting his focus from self-preservation to radical service-driven empathy, he annihilates the fear and unlocks his voice.
And the engine powering every single phase of this evolution, the master key that took him from stuck to unstoppable and from completely silent to a global authority, was the unyielding, unglamorous power of repetition.
And the ultimate takeaway here isn't just to be impressed by Bob Proctor's biography. The foundational implication of all this source material is that you, the person listening right now, possess those exact same deep, untapped reservoirs of talent.
Yeah, you have that same potential.
The only mechanical difference between you feeling stuck in a boardroom and the stars who win without even knowing how they do it is the conscious, repeated application of a new paradigm.
So I want to leave you with a lingering, slightly uncomfortable thought to mull over today. Bob Proctor listened to a single record 1,000 times before the intellectual data actually breached his subconscious and changed his behavior. What is the record playing in your life right now?
That's a great question.
What profound piece of advice? What genuine compliment about your capabilities? Or what hard, necessary truth have you heard 1,000 times from your friends, your family, or your mentors? You're hearing the words, but what haven't you actually allowed yourself to understand?
That is the exact question that unlocks the vault.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the absolute mechanics of extraordinary change. We wish you well on your own continued explorations into your personal potential. Keep questioning the baseline, keep digging into the mechanics, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.